I think I'll do that to all the broadcasts that I've had, is maybe do some kind of a giveaway, like and share it, right? Although yeah, I'll figure something out. There's quite a few people broadcasting nowadays too.
All right, hello, and we are live today with another episode of the Designer's Den. Today I have what I consider a special guest for me particularly. I'm just going to go ahead and say that I am involved with the project that Darrin is working on. I've had the honor of editing some of the stuff for them, but I'll go ahead and let Darrin introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Darrin Anderson, and the project we're working on is really a large effort that covers a setting that was a homebrew setting that we ran for about 20 years now, and we're really taking what we did in our own setting and really moving that into a 5e format. So it's called Dalreth. We're out at www.dalreth.com, and it's more than just a setting. There's adventures built into it. We've got new players options that sort of bridge the gap between the game we play at home and the current 5e rule set, and a whole host of monsters as well. But our first Kickstarter that we have launched right now is just simply the players options, and that's really what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, we are here to talk a little bit about this Kickstarter, a little bit about the design philosophy that you have behind it, and the inspiration, which, as I know, a lot of it's come from your son Jack, which
Yes,
is
it
super
does.
cool. But so, uh, why don't we just start with a little bit about like how is Dalrith a bit of a different setting than what we have so far?
Right. So the setting itself originated. We were on a pole. So in the world we used it on was the South Pole. It could be the North Pole. And we're looking at maybe a continent-sized landmass. Okay, so that's really what we're looking at in terms of what the setting was. There's a haven inside of the continent that's buried in glaciers. So the haven itself is near a hot spot by a dormant, and I'll put quotes around dormant, volcano. So the volcano itself keeps the area around it warm enough so you could have life, right? So you could plant, you could live there and have food and have other types of life forms living down there. So that's really the setting itself. It's an interesting setting in the sense that it's a containment. It's a sandbox where you can go do whatever you would want to within our setting, but there's a lot of containment when it comes to getting up on a glacier, and the harsh distances you travel across the glacier makes it very difficult to move between one city and different communities around that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's really the kind of the overall viewpoint of where you're at. Think of Antarctica, but with Yellowstone National Park sort of underneath it, where there's hot spots that give pockets of life.
Yeah, kind of like the vents on the ocean floor and stuff, how there's teeming, ocean life down there. I think that's a pretty cool concept, especially for, an environment that's typically seen as very harsh and unforgiving. Now, I just want to take a second here and kind of flip over to some of the races, the player options that you have in this book.
Absolutely.
This has been some of my favorite things so far that I've seen. Not only because they're just so vibrant, and each of them has their own unique culture, but the artwork too is absolutely phenomenal. Let me see if I can get some of this art up. But like, why don't you tell us a little bit about like some of these different you, you know player options that we've got available. So
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a number of races, or species is really what I refer to them as in my setting.
That's fair.
The species, the new species, I'll slip back and forth because, that's sometimes you do, but it's really our new species. So one of the ones that we can talk about is the Ursidae. So the Ursidae are polar bear people who have a relatively peaceful existence on the glacier. They live by one of the melted lakes by kind of like what you mentioned, where it's an underwater hotspot. There's an
Hmm.
under glacier hotspot that keeps part of the area melted. And they fish there and occasionally will go to the shore and bring back a whale and haul a whale back in as a tribe. So it's an interesting species because they really don't they're really not into combat, but they will defend themselves. And so, being the size of what they are, they're really about 6 to 800 pounds. So they're a large size. So
I
really,
mean,
what that
yeah, they're like a
option,
giant
yeah,
polar bear.
yeah. And so what we did is kind of brewed together what a polar bear would be if it was a humanoid
Hmm.
type of form, and so that's really the culture of it, the specifics of it. We've got a picture of the artwork out there. We even have a miniature that I can kind of show you. I think it might appear on the screen here.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're seeing that very well yet.
You got to put it right in front of you. Bring it back towards you a little bit so it's in focus. Yeah, there you are. So,
Okay,
a little hard to see, but
a little hard to see, but you can go out on the website and see some of the material that's out there too on it.
yeah, and I'll go ahead and put the website there in the chat for anyone who's interested in seeing that, along with the Kickstarter too, because
Yeah,
you can go right now and pledge on Kickstarter to get this. It's live actually,
yeah, we are.
and we're about halfway funded.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
And that's been that's really our goal, is to get this out there. We have other species too. So we have a Fey species. You helped out at that one. So really, the Fey species. Carl Danes is one of the authors that we
Mm-hmm.
have engaged with, and he wrote both of those. And the Fey species there will be also spells and additional components within the player's guide that really flesh out the Fae more than just what you've seen so far,
And
which is
more than
the
just
species
like
diagram.
your traditional kind of I guess Fae, like the Eladrin or whatever, like you see in the fifth edition like core books. They're going to be a little bit different than that. More of the they kind of made me think of the old Irish folk tales where they're a bit mischievous.
Yep, and they're from Inuit. A lot of our the history that I've developed in my setting was from Inuit mythology, was from some of the different types of non-Greek, right? So you don't see a lot of the Greek focus or the Roman or the Norse. You'll see mostly the other types of mythologies throughout the world
Mm-hmm.
you don't commonly see in settings. So that's where it really differentiates us. We kind of pick up some of the other areas, and I've always run with and dug up quite a bit of. I live in Wisconsin, and there's quite a few sources to get some of the old legends and myths that aren't even published anywhere. And so you'll see some of that in our guide too.
And quite a bit of inspiration up there for things that live in the frozen north, because that's what it is half the year, right?
Well, we do, and we even have we are froze. That's the whole point, right? That's why when we started, it was right after I moved up here. It was when I started the campaign, so kind of fit in place. The frozen tundra up here, but yeah, we even have some of the mythical creatures. So the Wisconsin's known for the hodag.
Mm-hmm.
So we even have a miniature for the hodag.
You have a
It's
miniature for the hodag.
Yes, I
Oh
do.
goodness.
I'll send you the sneak peek. I have it back
Uh,
right now. We're waiting to get it painted, but
I can't wait to see that.
I've
So
got a crack.
yeah,
Yeah.
so one of our viewers has commented on the artworks. It was really good art. So do you want to like talk a little bit about like so you went kind of art first because that was one of the first things that you had done, right?
Yeah, so I have material in notebooks and notepads and all over the place. And so while I'm going about compiling that and trying to translate it into 5e, I started in working on the artwork as well, because I thought a lot of what your setting is about your pictures. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I run and this setting has is deep details of characters. So an NPC just isn't a stat block. Monsters aren't just stat blocks. There'll be quite a bit of material for those. You did a read through of one of the monsters a while ago that had some material in it. You see, it's more than just a stat block, right? It's more than the same
Absolutely.
thing. It's so that's really what we're looking at. But really, to answer the question on the artwork, if you want to build out the characters, you need to have art of those characters, right?
I agree.
And so that's what we focused on, really, was to say, okay, what is House Thorn? And my son actually developed most of the concept for the artwork. So most of the descriptions were sent to different artists that we worked with, that then drew out what he wanted. Of course, he didn't always get what he wanted back, right? And he's 12-year-old, so it's been a challenge to be in the middle ground between that. But I think they've done a wonderful job
Yeah,
and stayed
sometimes it's
pretty true.
hard to go from, concept to finished product.
Well, and one of them was funny. He started with he wanted an explorer called Tutmos and Slip. That was his
hmm
concept. Tutmos and Slip, in a car conversation that I swear we had, but he doesn't remember having, he turned him into a werepolar bear that could
Oh,
shape shift into a werepolar bear. So that's what I went with the artwork, and it came back. He's like, "That's not what I wanted to be. I wanted to be with glasses and all this." And I'm
oh
like, "Oh no!" I'm like, "But this is phenomenal, right? The miniature was there, the sculpting was there." I'm like, "Well, we're gonna have to, maybe we'll make up somebody else." And so it's a challenge, right, in the
no.
design phase, is to figure out what did you think it was going to look like and what you got from it. And I think they've done a wonderful job of what I've asked, but I haven't always done a good job in what I call requirements, from where Jack comes up with ideas.
Well, I mean, it's a collaborative project, so he's learning at a young age now that sometimes you have to compromise.
That is true, and we're trying. Part of the reason why I started this was to, kind of on a whim, where he talked about a year ago. He said, "Hey, I'd like to run a D&D game."
hmm
And he knew I had run things in this setting, and said, "I'd like to run this." I said, "Well, I'm going to have to convert it into 5e and make it look good." And one thing led to another, of just getting a couple of pictures for a game he was going to run for some friends, to really what you see today. So it just kept going, right?
Right,
It's
yeah.
like that Pinewood Derby. If you've ever had kids and done a Pinewood Derby project, it's that Pinewood Derby project that the father's still working on the basement, right? Long after the kid you know, doesn't work on it anymore. But he does come in and help. We do design sessions and such together.
I guess I'm
But
probably the oddball there in that, like, my dad wanted to do my Pinewood Derby, and I'm like, you know what, Dad? No, I'm just gonna do this all by myself, okay?
keep your dad away from the Pinewood Derby project. You won't win, but you still did it yourself.
Hey,
But
I didn't win. It was close, but mine was beautiful. It was
yep.
super red, super shiny. It looked fast. It looked fast.
Well, that's what counts sometimes. Looks are important, but yeah. So that's how we started, and then it kind of turned into, hey, let's put this into kind of like the pinnacle of what we've run. Everybody that's played it throughout the years, I've had
Mhm.
probably 40 different people play different pieces of the setting, and so they all are behind it, saying you should publish this someday. And
I mean,
well,
that's a
that's
pretty
what we're looking
decent
at.
size for like a playtest group.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and so we'll end up doing full playtest, once the rules are converted, because we used other systems.
hmm
The most latest was Pathfinder, so a lot of this will look like a Pathfinder kind of feel to it. If anybody's curious about what the other systems were, that's the most latest. We also use Rollmaster in the early days, so there's some Rollmaster elements
It's
as well.
going way back.
Way back.
So, you've got a lot of stuff in there. So it's going to be a huge book, 200 plus pages,
Yep.
with 17 playable species and new subclasses, new feats, new backgrounds, and honestly, the backgrounds part is something that I'm super interested in because, like, that's a solid base to build out your character on from, like, a role play perspective. As someone, like, really likes role play, like, can you tell us a little bit about any of those?
Oh, absolutely. So what I did is, reverse engineered the background system. So, and said, I wasn't real happy with the different options that they gave, and thought,
You don't want to
let's
be an
throw them all.
you don't want to be
Let's
an
throw.
acolyte every time?
No, no, no. I mean, they did a lot of things really well in 5e. That's just one that I felt that needed a little bit of a refresh. And so what I did is just kind of threw everything they did out. I think I kept Acolyte just because it's also an ESRD, but I thought, well, I'll leave one here. And so we had to rebalance everything against the Acolyte, right? So the
Hmm.
whole thing, right, the whole thing in design is how to keep your design so it's as balanced as you can. Then you put it out to the public, you find out where your holes are and you fix them, right? And try to get everything in parity so it looks close enough, right?
Yeah. You
That's the playtest group, right?
send it
So
out to a group of min maxers and see what they break.
that's it. That's I've got that. I've got an internal group, and I know some people over in the UK that can do that for me too. So, so at any rate, so the backgrounds. What I did then was put a chart together and said I want to have all of the different abilities a representation, and then I put another chart together. I'm a chart person that had all of the different vocations that would occur within the setting.
Hmm.
So beekeepers is an example. You'll never
Beekeep
see
beekeeping in the
beekeepers.
Arctic. That doesn't really
Yeah.
work.
Well, and here's how this all came about. This is interesting. So I'm busy working on plants and talking about crops and such. And Jack comes up to me and he says, you can't really have crops without bees, right?
That's true though.
And
And
I looked
unless
at
you've
him.
got someone manually pollinating it.
I looked at him and I said, "Huh," right? I'm just like, I'm like, He was 11 at the time. I'm like, I think you're right. And so I'm like, I had thought about it for a few minutes. I'm like, okay, so we have to have bees. And then he's like, well, and you won't have very many bees in that kind of a setting unless you raise them, right? Because it's small, valley. You probably have people. Then you could have honey. And I said,
Oh, and then
oh,
we can have
okay.
mead.
So now we have, and he's like, and we can put honey with cider and make a honey cider as a drink too. I'm like, oh, so he created a whole like downstream effect.
A whole
And so then,
industry.
yeah, whole industry. So he's figured it out. And so he calls it Arctic cider or Arctic cider.
Hmm.
And it's a blue cider. And there's some artwork out there. You may see gnomes pouring a blue drink. That's them making the Arctic cider from bees that they raise. And the Arctic bees, of course, are blue, right?
Okay.
So they're blue stripes instead of yellow stripes. So there's the beekeeper now. So that's how each of the different backgrounds kind of built up. Now you could use a beekeeper in any setting. So
Right.
that's what we're trying to look at is to say, okay, this is a beekeeper. It fits into anywhere. It doesn't have to be here. And we're looking at all of the different areas covered. So basically you could take the 50 backgrounds that we've developed and completely replace all of your other backgrounds. And we feel they're very well balanced
Hmm.
and kind of laid them out. And I think you've looked at one of them. I think you've seen one of them that we have
I
out
think
there.
so. I think so. I
Yeah,
got a couple more people
we
joining
have to
us.
do some work on them still to get them all through that playtest review, but we have everything all developed in terms of what each background is going to be and what they give you as bonuses and such.
Yeah.
So
And then some of the other stuff that you've got on here that definitely like sticks out to me is 200 plus new spells. As someone who can't create a new spell to save her life, I've tried, and I look at it and I'm like, this is great. And then I start
it's
googling it and I'm like, oh, somebody already. I probably didn't realize that I'd read this somewhere.
right. So I've got the main author for most of our spell. Well, two authors are brothers, Jeff and Andy, and they did most of the design work on most of the spells. Now I've reserved one section of the spells to myself, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But really, what they did is they looked through all the gaps. So they went through and did it from a study of what's missing for spells. So
Okay.
we looked at all the different gaps in the spells and said, okay, we want to fill in all the gaps. The system we were playing with Pathfinder has a lot more versatility in spells, so you can kind of port over some of those ideas. And then the homebrew that we ran with, we took the whole listing of all the spells that are in my homebrew setting and translated those. So when they put
Okay.
those pieces together, that gave us about 150
That's a great
spells that
start.
are, I would say, gap spells. Now that we're not just creating spells to create spells. Anybody could make 1,000 spells that just are anything, but they're actually worded the same way
Mm,
in
okay.
terms of how the wording is. So it just looks like it. In fact, one of the spells that they had done was identical to one of the spells in Icewind Dale. So when Icewind Dale hit, I looked and said, okay, well, we got one, we got it, we can pull out now, right? So there's one overlap, which isn't bad out of 200. So we have to make another one to get to 200, right? But that's where we're at. But the spell list that I'm focused on are what's the spells around a new class called a Mind Weaver.
Ooh, what does the Mind Weaver
So
do?
the Mind Weaver, if you think of a wizard, probably the best way to describe it is a wizard, and instead of getting the magic from really external type sources, it's all of the magic's coming from their mind.
Okay.
So if you, in a loose way, you might think of a psionics, but
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Kind of
it's
like
nowhere
some.
near like psionics. It's a different, different concept, but maybe that would be the easiest to describe it as a psionics. Um, but they still cast spells like a wizard, so it's not like they keep trying to make a psionic work within D&D, and I think they haven't done that very well, in my opinion, too far yet. But what this is kind of what we do in our homebrew setting, and really they're just wizards with spells that almost in some ways closer to the force than anything. So if you think about
I mean, that
again
makes a
back.
lot of sense. It comes from within you or the mitochondria, whichever you prefer.
Right, right. It's the same kind of, yeah, it's the same kind of concept. We have it well written and described, but I'm just trying to put it in, easy terms to describe. But basically, the spells are things like mind control, mind reading, object manipulation with your mind,
Okay.
and
Telekinesis.
yep, and some self-healing. So what's interesting about the mind weavers is that they can cast their spells even when they're unconscious,
Okay, because it's just like part of who they are.
as long as their brain is active.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right? Now, if their brain isn't active, now they could be drunk and maybe not cast the spells, right? So there's some intoxication problems with it if their mind isn't, there's some stun, there's
Hmm.
some types of effects like stun that they wouldn't be able to overcome. But if their body's unconscious, then they can still cast spells. So it's interesting. They play the game a little differently than what a wizard would. And the area of effects are limited to usually just one item or target. So
Okay.
you won't see them casting fireballs. They're not a wizard with a bunch of new spells. They're
So that
really
that
a
prevents it
completely different.
from kind of being overwhelming of like the other types of wizard because you've got it kind of limited. Well, it's immense power. You've kind of limited it to the range, I guess, on what it can do.
Right, and it's usually a single target.
Yeah, I
Right, so
think
they're
that does help with the balance, like you're saying.
yeah. There's no like and the reason why I keep shying away from psionics is they had like psionic blasts that could imitate wizard damage. It's a
Psionics is
it's
overpowered, especially
it's a
in fifth
single
edition.
yeah.
That's
It's a
why we
single
don't have
target.
it yet.
Well, maybe
I'm
this
sorry.
will help.
I'm sorry to all of my friends who really want psionics. I don't want you at my table.
well, maybe when you look through this, you might let mind weavers in, right?
Maybe.
You
See,
might like mind
maybe
weavers.
here's your substitute. But like, psionic is overpowered. Amen. Drop the
Well,
deck.
right. And so that's why I shy away from it because it's not psionics the way you've seen it implemented in the past. And the other thing to keep in mind on the Mindweaver class itself is that and DMs of course don't have to use it, right? So this
Right.
everything in this is a tool chest that you can pick and choose from. So you could just take the background options. They alone are well worth the product, to have a whole different background list. But this Mindweaver, what it would allow you to do is be able to also explain, like if you've ever run a city setting. So here's a big design challenge. I have a city, I have a bunch of non-player characters, the plots are deep. How do you keep your wizard from walking around and just mind reading and spoiling the plot?
Well, first off, start your city campaign at a real low level where your wizard
You
can't do that.
can, you can, but they're gonna gain levels. So
Oh
then what do
well,
you
let's
do?
start with the easy solution. And then like it's a city. There's just so much. It's overwhelming. Like how are they picking out the relevant information? I mean,
Well, and
have you
and
been in New York City and tried to eavesdrop going down the sidewalk? There's just a lot going on.
it is a lot going on in New York City. That is for sure. I've been there, but
What if
how?
your city's smaller? So like, Madison, Wisconsin. Okay, okay. I can see it. You've got a reasonable number of people on the street. Like that makes sense. Your wizard could conceivably find their target or who they think is their target and then get a read on them.
Yep. So what I've developed with the Mind Weaver is a whole, I wouldn't call it a subsystem, but it kind of is how to handle that. So there's a system built into how do you handle reading minds? How do you handle if people knew about it? Um, some of the noble houses will employ mind weavers to block
Mm-hmm.
that, right? There's a whole bunch of new magic items that'll be available that will block some of that or make it harder to do. And spells,
And then
right?
there's magic you can do to combat it.
And wizard and cleric spells that you can use to block the mindweaver spells, right? So that's where some of the additional spells would be available to wizards and clerics and sorcerers and such, particularly bards, to be able to do some of the blocking, right? So that's the other thing is to,
That
you
sounds
put something in, you have to have counters put in as well, and that's what we've looked
checks
at
and
doing.
balances. Yeah,
Yeah,
makes sense.
absolutely. To keep it, the goal is to make it a balanced class. I mean, it may not be perfectly balanced, but I think we've made a good kind of middle ground for everything. So it's playable, so it's interesting, but it's not where, okay, you're going to play that and he's going to just take the whole campaign over, or she's going to just run the whole campaign with a mind weaver, right?
Well, so one thing that's probably going to be interesting to people right now, with yours being an Arctic type setting as well, what's like your favorite of the species or the subclasses that you feel just really just like represents, like, I guess you can do one for each, that just represents like the feel of the setting.
Sure.
I know it's a hard question. Choose your favorite child.
My favorite one, well, my favorite, the one that the groups have all loved are the gold halflings.
Okay.
So the gold halflings live in a valley that is perfectly normal, and it looks like I mean you have oak trees, you wouldn't even know you're in the middle of a glacier, and they're
Suspicious.
they're they're like in their own world, right? In a
Mm-hmm.
sense, they worship a god who collects gold.
Okay. Gold.
Um, they throw the gold into their wishing well, and their god protects them. Okay. So I don't want to give away too much of the details of that, but I think really it's what's clever about this arrangement is the god also manifests itself as squirrels. So it'll send squirrels around as its eyes and ears. So you'll
Oh
see
my god.
acorns in some of the artwork. You might see an acorn on the halflings. That means they're connected to the god, which is a golden acorn is its symbol. Now, what's really kind of interesting about this is that God really exists below the well.
Mm-hmm.
So there's actually in the well collecting gold coins and stacking them up like somebody who's bored would collect coins, an old man that has nothing better to do than to try to collect coins. And he's missing a couple in his collection.
Oh no.
So that's the whole background of the halflings is they're out chasing down gold coins for their god, who's just an immensely powerful being that's just collecting coins in the basement. And not everybody, when the players actually get there and see it, I know I'm spoiling a little bit of the plot, but when they get there and see that, it's kind of an interesting. There's a lot more to it, like what form it is and what powers it has, but they derive a lot of their powers through channeling from their god, which really isn't a god, but just an immensely powerful being that collects coins. And so it keeps the halflings busy looking for the coins. They're on quests to try to gain gold coins. In the whole setting itself, there's no gold within the city of Dalreth.
Mm-hmm.
It's gone to more of a steel economy, right? Because it's practical.
Very true.
And, you know, it is what it is. And so when the halflings that come in here are looking for gold, it makes for some quite the comic relief in a sense that they're looking for something that isn't even here, nobody values. And so that's kind of the fun part of it is that the players can't understand it, right? Because you're used to looking for gold
So they're on a bit of
everything.
a snipe hunt.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there is some available, right, in
Well,
the setting, but
snipes are real.
yeah, yeah, and so they're looking for gold coins for a gold coin collection, essentially, right? That they don't know that, but they just know their god likes gold. So that's kind of how they have to play it
Well,
out. So that's
I mean,
that's
you had me sold with adorable little squirrels are like the representative of the god, because I'm like, I can already see like so many possible interactions for that, because if the squirrels just following people around, you've got your paranoid party members who are like something's going on here, and then you've got your people who like insist on interacting with all the adorable wildlife. I don't know anyone who would do that. Uh,
It-
that's me. And then it's just like, there's a lot of fun interactions you could have there with that, as far as like what they're doing, how they're getting it, and yeah.
and it was funny, the first encounter we had when the players encountered the squirrels, I thought for sure the ranger was going to shoot one. They were hungry. They'd come underneath they'd just come up out of a river and through a cavern. I thought for sure, I mean, went out looking for some food, right? And he saw a squirrel, and I thought that squirrel's a goner, right? And they didn't. He like, does the squirrel look like he's looking at me? And I'm like, yep. Did he run away? Nope. And he went back to group. He's like, the squirrels are smart. They're intelligent squirrels here. Is how he figured it out right away as soon as he saw it. So it was a lot of we have had a lot of fun with that, with the squirrels.
I think I would too. So you started in on this god for the gold halflings, and you've got a complete pantheon for Dalreth.
Yep.
So how are those gods different than like the Forgotten Realms pantheon? Are they like all? Do all the gods have an alignment? Is alignment a thing in Dalreth?
Well, we stick with the alignment mostly out of tradition,
Mm-hmm.
but really the homebrew I run, we don't really focus on alignment because it locks you in black and white, and a lot of the things are gray,
They're more like
right? And in life.
guidelines.
Yeah, they're guidelines. Exactly. Alignment is a guideline. That's kind of how I see it as. So the gods themselves that are in the Dara pantheon, I can give you one that's a good example who really is a god. So because the city is on a pole, you could put it in your north pole. You could set it north of some game if you wanted to. So you
In
could
the
do that.
far,
You could put
far,
it in the
far
south
north.
pole, far, far north, and it's nearly close to the pole. So one of the villains is located with a castle on the pole,
Ooh,
but Dalreth is a little off the pole. And so if you think about Polaris kind of
mm-hmm.
being set in the sky in the northern
In the very north.
hemisphere,
Mm-hmm.
there's a due south, or again, you could use this on either sphere hemisphere that you put the game setting on, but there's a star that's bright that's straight overhead that doesn't move much, right? That's
Okay.
essentially Polaris. And so that's in this pantheon, that's God's home, which I call it that, but we're coming up with better names as we get ready for publish. But my homebrew names, are being reworked. Jack's doing a lot of that himself, coming up with new names and new ideas, but I call it God's home in my setting. And so really that's where they live. And that's where you're drawing the powers from. So it's a family of about 12 different gods that live there. Now there's other gods that aren't connected. So you have the uh, the gold halfling, very powerful being, and you have spirit and nature, of course.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of this is derived from Inuit and that type of mythology. So there's a lot of nature type magic. But from the god's home, they're out there. And one of the gods that I can talk about is the god Dalreth. So of course the city's named after the god.
That
And at
makes sense.
the center of the city, there's a big statue of Dalreth, and he carries a big cube that's a die. So he has a die in his hand, and he's a god of fortune. So
Okay.
that's one of the gods.
That makes sense then. Die, god of fortune, so chance.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So that's one of the domains. So there'll be so the pantheon is a completely throughout all the current pantheon domains, and then they're rebundled together, kind of like what I did with the backgrounds. They're rebundled together underneath this pantheon. Again, you can choose to use this. You could use your Forgotten Realm pantheon if you're familiar with that. It's just another item in the tool chest you could drop into your setting.
Okay, so to kind of change directions a little bit and go back to art. So the artwork behind you, that's from Dalrith,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yes it is.
Catalina,
Yes it is.
why don't you tell us about that guy there? Because we can only see, the viewers can only really see like from the back of his head down, but like that's a very large fellow, very fearsome. That axe looks like it's ready to do some business. Like I mean, your artwork is absolutely stunning. So that would be environmental art. That one. So by
Yes, yes. So
uh,
I have Philip did the environmental art. He's phenomenal, as you can tell. I mean, there's yeah, I can't say enough about his the work he's done for us, and he's done all the cover art for us. Um, and so this particular piece is going to be on the monster book. So this is a cover art for the monster book. You can see a frost giant there. He's got a wolf companion, and behind me there's like a
Oh,
ice
I didn't even
scorpion.
notice the wolf.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's the cover art from the book. So if you think of it, everything on this side of me is the back cover, and
Hmm.
over here's the front cover. That's how it'll wrap around in the book when you see it.
Okay,
So
so
give
we've
you
got
kind of an
the
idea of the
frost
monster.
giant and his wolf companion, and then
Yeah.
the ice scorpions on the back. I mean, this it's yeah, it's very visually impressive, and it kind of sets the tone that there's a lot of potential danger and excitement in this area. I
Yeah.
mean,
And
I know I wouldn't want to be a little level one adventurer out taking a stroll and then come upon this fight.
yep, yep. And so he's done a number of pieces for us, and the color palette is amazing, right? They're all the kind of same look to them. So when the book we put the art together in a book format, it'll look amazing together, right? We all like that on our shelves, right? What something looks like on a shelf, and I wouldn't even think about doing an alternate cover. I think his art is amazing. I think I already have the alternate cover,
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
This
you know,
is this is
sometimes an alternate cover is just unnecessary. You know, especially when you're starting out with a Kickstarter and everything too. An alternate cover is just like additional expense where
right.
you could be just moving forward and adding more content instead.
Yeah, and
And
that's my thinking on it. I mean, I certainly like some of the alternate covers that you see coming out of D&D. Those are really nice too, but I'm so impressed with what he does. That's really kind of been real happy with that. And so
I've
he
been
did a number
working
of
on
the
a Theros game. Sorry.
so he did a number of the environmental art, and then the character art has been split between a number of different artists. So Jerlene, I hope that's how you say your name correctly. She did some of the pirate art, so some of the female pirate characters that are the ice elves.
Hmm.
So we have some pirates that are up on the glacier that live on catamaran sailing ships that skim the ice using wind magic. And so she did some of the different pirates for that as well. And so she did amazing work on that faction. Then we have
And I'm gonna drop
both.
the Kickstarter
Oh,
link
sure.
again for everyone that's joined, so they can see some of this art that we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Her work is really good. I've got some really good work out of Bernardo. Yeah, he's done some of the factions. He did the House Thorn faction, and he's done a couple of the other factions as well. And then also Lee Rostolov, he did a lot of really the heavy lifting on a lot of the character art that you see. So like the bear, right? He did the bear, the Ursa Day, and the Fae, and a lot of those. And he's turned those out. He can turn those out real fast. So he's been
And
a
his
workhorse.
style of art, it definitely does put me in mind a little bit of some of the Paizo artwork, which that's definitely not a bad thing because some of their art is absolutely phenomenal. So his style is it's great. It's very distinctive look for each of the characters, and so yeah, uh, you know, absolutely, you know, just awed by the work that Lee's put into all of this. So you mentioned the factions, and
Yeah.
you've got faction pins, right?
Well, there's 12.
Badges,
Yeah, pins. Yes, we do have faction badges. So I'll kind of try to put one up to the camera. You might be able to see it.
and that's the House Barton one. Yeah, that's a lot
That's
more
the House
visible.
Barton.
Yeah,
Yep, that's a House Barton. They're made out of metal, and there's a pin on the back, and pretty big if you wear them. There's 3 inches in size. So part of the promotional item was to have those badges. So if you've seen some of the premium edition of games and such, so we went with the badges. Approach. A friend of mine's making those, and they turned out really well, as you can tell by the pictures and the photographs of those. We've got 2 of them for this Kickstarter. One's Rose House Thorn, and we didn't put the house names on the badges. In one way, you can use them for anything, right? So if you're a cosplayer, you could use them in your cosplay. You could use them in your own campaign setting. You may
hmm
not want this to be Barton. So I decided to opt not putting like the Barton and putting if you
yeah. I mean
the
that makes
crest thing
sense.
and just putting their symbol. You can use for dwarves, right? It could be a
That is
dwarf in your
definitely
setting.
very much a dwarven thing with the hammer and everything. So the House Thorn one. Is that the one correct that we'll be doing a giveaway on Facebook after this episode is done? We're gonna run, or
Yes, yes. We're gonna do. We'll look at the choice. So I
oh,
have both
okay,
a Barton and a Thorn, so they can choose whichever one they want, and we'll do a giveaway for one of those two. The Thorns will take a little while. They're still being fully developed. We had some troubles with the red. Trying to get the right shade of red is. I'm very picky about that, so we finally
yeah,
nailed
the
it.
enamel pens sometimes can be a little bit of a pain, but yeah, so the house thorn when they're
It kept
it,
turning pink, and the pink isn't bad, but it just didn't look
but
the
it's not
same as the
red.
artwork.
I like red.
Right, right. It didn't, I didn't want Christmas. It was either pink or Christmas red, and to get it to the right red was really tough. But I think we nailed it, and so yeah, that'll be available within a couple of weeks. It'll be, I should have that in hand or a week or
Yep.
so.
And
So
so when this episode is wrapped and we'll have the video available for viewing later, I'm going to be posting that on Facebook, and we'll just be taking comments there about the episode, and from those comments we'll be selecting a winner that'll get one of these pens. And like I said, they're these 3-inch metal badges, and they're pretty substantial, so you definitely won't want to miss that because it's a pretty cool item. And they're going out to the Kickstarter backers. So this is a way to get one if
mhm.
for a friend or for your significant other, so you can have two, so you don't have to argue over the one.
You use it as a stress ball on your table if you want to, right? And I don't know.
No,
Anyway, but
I
it,
don't think
we could.
metal things are really. Maybe like a worry stone.
Murray
There,
Stone, that's
yeah.
it. Pet rock or something, right? It's a new pet rock.
A new pet rock.
So,
Yeah.
but
Oh goodness. So let's see. What else do you want to talk about your design for anything else, or we've covered a lot so far.
no, we have, and one of the things that that really what we're looking at doing is building upon. This is the first Kickstarter with the books, and so we're looking at building upon one piece at a time. So we build the player's book out there, get the options out to people right away. You can start using that in your own game. As we're working on a monster book, the monster book covers monsters both within the Arctic area, or the ice area, I should say, but also there's other biomes. So this isn't just only ice setting. It's we've got a swamp that that you can go and visit, a rather sizable one. There's also volcanic area as well, and a desert that my son is working on, a desert and an underwater pieces that he's doing as well. So it's more than just ice, right? So those monster books are being worked on. We have Number of the Monster. Alexander did a lot of the work
Mm-hmm.
on our monsters, and we've got those in development. And then there'll be the setting book with the adventures afterwards. So these are the foundation of getting to where you could run the full game within the setting. And what we're looking at. So on top of that, we also have miniatures available as well. And so we did a successful Kickstarter for the first batch of miniatures. So we do have 9, I think, that are available right now. And then we've got 35, I think the latest count that I have in sculpting or mastering stage. And they're all pewter miniatures right now. And those will be available regardless of what happens if we hit the stretch goals or not. It just may not be the same price that we have it set at. So we did have pretty low prices for those
Yeah, and
to try to
that's
get that.
definitely kind of one of the incentives of getting in early is catching that low price. So
Yeah,
get a bit of a
yeah,
bargain.
and there's and I can do that when you process 100 orders at once, right?
Right.
So when you do 100 orders at once, it makes it a lot easier to fulfill them than if you did one here and one there. So that's why that's where you save a lot of money on that. So yeah, definitely joining us in the campaign would help that out. And we may unlock some of those even if we don't hit those goals. If they finish up through production, we may unlock those as well
Yeah,
as part of the
and
campaign.
actually, so if you're in the stream right now, active watching it, you'll also notice that in the chat, the giveaway for my giveaway for this week has just gone live. Giving away, it's also a metal thing. So we've got this water deep gold dragon coin, pretty substantial size and weight, and I'll just be sending that to whoever wins, shipping it out in the mail. So make sure that you go ahead and do exclamation point raffle if you want to enter in for that. And yeah, and so goodness, like you've actually got a lot of, speaking of all these physical products, you've actually got a lot of physical stuff that's going out with this book to accompany it. You've got your badges, you've got your pewter miniatures, you've got plans for all kinds of other stuff once you get out past this player book to where you're going to do DM screens and other.
Yep. And you saw the map. You
And
saw the city map yesterday.
I saw the city map yesterday, and so don't have it available to show right now, but this map was amazing. It'll be, would you say, printable poster size to 6 foot by 4 foot.
Yep.
And so when I was looking at it, and you can see it, it is available small view on the Dalreth website. Um, and so there, when you're looking at it, it looks like it's just, a little city down in a glacier with a bunch of houses that you can see. But then you can just zoom in and in and in and in. And each of the little houses has little windows, and you can see the details on the statue of Dalrith in the center of the city. And you can see the house Bolton Manor out there. Or was that House Thorn? But like
Spartan, but yeah, and
but
House
like
Thorn. Yep.
but I was just like, how far in can we zoom? Are we gonna see
Yeah.
the little people in the window?
He didn't go that deep on the artwork, but he got the little lights in the windows, right, when he did it. So we took the maps that I had developed, and he went to town on it with an aqueduct system as well. So there's an aqueduct running through the city to bring water. They have running water inside the town. So yeah, and you can see even the cobblestone on the ground in some parts of the city. We didn't. I don't think we. I think we gave up after we did the center for the cobblestone, but you can see if you zoom into the center area, you see
Oh
it,
yeah, they're
which is the
in the
focus.
town square, yeah.
Yeah, in the focus area, the rest is covered in snow, but the area where it's heavy traffic, a lot of it you can see even down to the cobblestone level, which is pretty amazing.
That
Yeah,
just absolutely blows my mind there. Like that, the level of like detail and like work that has gone into just like bringing this to life is just. I'm just blown away every time we talk. You show me something new, and I'm just like more and more excited for this project.
yeah. Well, thank you. And we've got again. This is. I mean, if you think about this, this is where my mind has existed for 20 years, right? We've been running the game there. We never really dreamed of making it into a product, or I probably would have started writing 20 years ago and it'd all be done, right? But really just a homebrew setting that we just had
Mm-hmm.
fun with. And with Jack coming to age and he wanted to start publishing things and podcasting and do all the things that is popular now, I thought, well, I'll try to help him, try to take what I have for ideas and add his to them. He even has one of the encounters you're really going to love when you edit it. So when you get to it, you let me know if it's as good as I just typed it up. It was pretty amazing when he came up with it. So I've never seen anything like it anywhere. So I'm like, okay, that I can't take credit for that one at all, but he has a pretty amazing. It's a diversionary encounter that everybody's going to fall. We call it the carrot, right? That lures you away from the main plot line. So
Oh,
I think it'll fit really well.
side quests are my downfall.
Yes, it is.
I have yet to finish the Skyrim main quest, everybody. I am so sorry. I needed to rescue all of the cats and the children and send food, and it's just never gonna happen. but like um there's a lot of players though who enjoy that kind of thing. I mean, I'm not saying that I dislike it because like I'm okay that I've never finished it. But like so yeah, so this having this distraction and going off and doing this exciting and sounds like it's gonna be fun encounter over to the side, like that's like, well, some people are gonna be a little like, oh, okay, so it was just a diversion. Like other people are gonna like really probably lean into it and demand some improv from the DM on, well, now where do we go?
Now what do we do? And that's the sandbox nature of what I've developed, and where then Jack overlays some plot into it, right? So it's a good we've been a great co-designer together. The whole tale, if you think about what the setting is and you dig into it, it's really a tale of survival after a cataclysm. So
Mm-hmm.
cataclysm occurred before recorded history. We didn't put a timeline down to it because then it starts limiting
Yeah.
you. It limits you, to be honest. I know what the timeline is, but I haven't really disclosed it. It may be buried inside the adventure, but it's not like I have a timeline that I'll put out that'll be handed to the players. You'll have to find out how long ago it was, and it was a long time ago. The cataclysm. It was a demon that was summoned from from the stars that came down and smashed into the land. And that's what set about an ice age in a sense.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Interesting.
so the plot line of all this is that the indigenous people who live there, who are really more like Inuit rather than like an Eskimo. I mean, Eskimo is Inuit, but it's more of an Inuit like Greenland,
Okay.
yeah, some of the original inhabitants in Norway as well, and some North American of the indigenous people there. All that mythology was what who lived there, and then the houses, the noble houses, sort of invaded this city area and set up shop. So it's kind of a tale of two cultures. So
So
there's
sounds
the
like
in
some
city
colonization.
culture, in a sense, yes, by force, right? So you have the city with where all the action's going on, and then you have another valley that's further away that is where the Kuda tribe lives, and they have the food. So it's you want to get fed, you have to trade with them. And so there's a lot of interaction between tribes and between factions, and everything you do impacts their favor of you. So the system that's set up is that as you do different things in the game, you can help one faction and hurt another without even really knowing, like real life, right? You say something, you just offended somebody, you didn't know you just offended them, you didn't mean to, but you did. It's the same kind of system that I have built in here. So everything players do in a way can impact the environment around them. So it's more than just go follow this path for an adventure. It's more like, where do you want the adventure to end, which is fun for a DM to run,
Hmm.
because you don't really know where it's going to end.
No,
Um,
absolutely, I agree.
you don't know where the players are going to take it. You're not forcing them in any way. But one of the overlying plot lines is there was actually 5 houses currently in the city. One of them had been exiled, a
Okay.
sixth house. And the
Ooh.
players in 20 years had never run into the sixth house in my game. So nobody even knew it existed. So when I said there's 6 houses when we're writing it, they all like were stunned.
We're
Like,
like,
what?
what? Like
what?
you
What's this?
you've
What's this? I'm like,
misspelt it.
yeah, they even actually have a mansion in town you never went and investigated because you thought that old haunted mansion, you're not going to go there because only ghosts live there, right? So they never found any
Well,
traces
that's exactly
of.
where you go. That's
I know.
exactly where you go. There's an old haunted mansion. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously there's secrets and treasure there.
They never went there, never even looked at it, didn't pay any attention. That's the sandbox environment. I didn't force them to go there, so they
Right.
didn't even know about this. So basically, the sixth faction wants to reclaim,
Hmm.
House Scarth wants to reclaim their dominance in the city, and is back with a vengeance. So their viewpoint is, revenge is a virtue. So that kind of sets the tone of what's happening in the background, with them as well. So, but that doesn't mean they're the evil faction. They may actually
No.
be coming
Just
back for the good of the city. Who knows, right?
they just, I want to reclaim their family, I guess, honor and dignity. And that's not necessarily bad. Like maybe they were exiled for a reason that wasn't really like I mean, as a DM, you can really take that any way you want.
Yeah, and we have Jack created we role played out the incident
Oh, the
that got them
incident.
exiled, and it's amazing. It's actually, you wouldn't expect this from a 12-year-old, but it's kind of a Victorian romantic kind of background type of setting. So it'll be interesting, when you see it, that what caused this was really, if you think about it, it's a whole different, than what you might expect. It wasn't like a power thing. It was, romantic type
Oh,
background. And I'm like, well, that's kind of interesting coming from a 12-year-old, but it's Victorian style romance type of thing. So,
well,
yeah. So,
I'm a huge geek for period drama pieces. So like you've got me with the Victorian romance and the unrequited love and the love that you shouldn't have. It's all very taboo, and you found out about it, and then it's just
yep,
like,
yep,
oh goodness.
yep. So I'm sure he read something in school that triggered that, like Shakespeare or something, right? He probably heard about it. So,
Shakespeare
hasn't read it yet.
influences a lot of things. Like the King Lear was Storm King's Thunder. Some of it, like you could, if you're
Yep.
familiar with Shakespeare, you definitely saw that. So like having Shakespearean influences, like that's pretty common. And
Yeah.
you know, not necessarily like you said, you're Greek or Roman. A lot of that, a lot of
Mhm.
Shakespearean influence was also from that folklore and stuff. Like he drew from these at that point in time, they weren't very common influences for writing, and so it was revolutionary for that. So I think you're following in good steps there. I,
So, so there's so much to this. This is more than just a player's guide. This is the beginning of, right, where we've got the artwork. I think 80 or 90 of the different non-player characters are done, and the designs are there. The player's guide we needed to do first so that we could use that as a toolkit to build those NPCs.
mm-hmm.
So we had to kind of overlay that first. So that's kind of our toolkit, and then each of the NPCs are being built out of that toolkit, and then the monsters, of course, are on their own path. But when we do the adventures, you won't see traditional style monsters. You're going to see a lot of mythology and legends from different, indigenous tribes and people throughout the world. So it's really a combination of, all the things that you didn't get with griffins and hydras, right, when you have in your typical game. And that's one of the reasons why we decided to do miniatures, is that not everybody has a hodag miniature or anything that would look like one. So that's where we went down that path of being able to add that legend into it. From the It was a Wisconsin legend that's near and dear to many people's hearts up here, the hodags. So
I'm gonna have to look
our
that up.
take on them.
I'm not familiar with the Hodag.
Yeah, it's a myth. It's a creation in the 1890s. Some lumberjacks made it up, so it's more of a local, like a Bigfoot kind of thing up here. But been a lot of fun at working on the background of that too, because you hear a
Oh,
number of different things from it. So.
I see the. Sorry, there's a sculpture of a Hodag apparently.
Oh yes, yes. So I'll tell you the story, that we had the miniature carved exactly like that sculpture, until we realized that sculpture actually has a trademark on it.
Oh no! So then you had to redo it.
I had to redo it. Yep. Once I realized that the city, and it wasn't an individual owned sculpture where I could talk to somebody and say, hey,
Mm-hmm.
if I give you 50 pewter miniatures, can I use your design? Or if I pay you a couple $100, can I use your design? No, the actual city of Rhinelander owns it. And I'm like, I'm never going to get this through a city council meeting, right? So I'm like, okay, I got to redesign it to what was from the original newspaper drawing. So I had to redo it. Plus, the face on that looks a little goofy. We made it more of a badger. So if you think of that sculpture you see there and have a badger face on it, it looks a lot better for a D&D
So
mini anyway.
yeah, so I'm just gonna go ahead and link the Hodag uh
Oh
here
my
here here
gosh.
here in chat.
Hopefully that won't. Yep. I'll
Uh,
I'll have the painted one up
the
in a couple of
the
weeks. But
cryptid. So, for those of you not doing that, it's described as a fearsome critter resembling a large bull-horned carnivore with a row of thick curved spines down its back, kind of prehistoric in suggestion, and it looks like a dinosaur with like Bigfoot's face on it and bull horns.
big horns on the side. Yep.
Oh
Uh,
my goodness.
Yep, yep. So that's one of the that's the hodag up here. Mine looks more like a badger. So if you take the
Okay.
face of a badger and you do the horns on it, and so a lot of the creatures that we have developed are that. So we use you really don't have many horses in the Arctic, so they wouldn't do well with hoofs, right, on top of the glacier. So we use a
Yeah.
creature that's kind of a combination between a hamster and a badger, and it's called a hamel. And so that's what they use to carry goods with. So instead of hoofs, it's more of a badger, hamster, large creature. So we have that. That hasn't been sculpted yet, but we have the artwork done on the hamel as well. So that's kind of
Yeah.
the near and dear. They're kind of the sled dogs of the setting, and
Okay.
everybody loves hamels.
Yeah.
So
Oh, Lord was right in reaction to that whole hack.
what
Oh,
was the reaction? What was
yeah,
it?
he just said, "Oh Lord."
Oh Lord. I actually have that STL sculpt, so if somebody crazy wants to print it, I'd consider letting that one out. But I don't think I can because it's trademarked.
You
So
can't. You can't sell it.
I don't think I can. No, no, I don't think I should give it away. But it's funny that I had it. I'll show a picture of it. I'm like, I like to honor the trademarks that people have, and plus,
Yeah. No, of course.
plus really the Hodag, the city didn't create it, but they do own quite a bit of intellectual rights. So we're using the same name. That's you can't really trademark a name itself, but they do the statue, so it's kind of funny. So we
Yeah,
had to
I
do a
mean,
lot of
at that point, it's like Bigfoot. You can't trademark Bigfoot anymore.
right,
It's
right.
it's just a
Um,
thing.
and the city would probably lose a trademark battle, except the sculpture's so ridiculous that they'd win that, right? Because, but the name Hodag, no.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So there, we have a lot of those other. We've looked through all the other myths and pulled out creatures.
Well,
Got some from
I hope
Cherokee.
I hope some of the others are as interesting as this one.
They are, they are.
I
The
know some.
Yeehaw.
I know some of the Cherokee monsters because I grew up down in Tennessee. So some of the Cherokee monsters are definitely fearsome looking. They've got. I don't even know how to describe them, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We've got about 80 that we've worked up so far, that I've used in my setting that we've ported over, and then there's more. Right, I keep looking, and Jack keeps coming up with a new one, and says, "Oh, there's another one." I'm like, "Okay, we got another one to add into our monster collection that really has never been covered before." We don't I'm trying to shy away from doing the types of things that have been done before,
Hmm.
and really hit the areas that no one's looked at yet. And one of that is really a Native American type legends and myths. The what I call the early settler myths. That's the Hodag, right, from the early settlers,
Early
and then
settlers.
Inuits as well, right, and some Australian. I've got some friends in Australia that have submitted a few things for theirs too, so that you've never seen in a fantasy role
Yeah.
playing setting before.
Well, final comment there is the gold dragons look really good. But we are coming to the end of our hour, Darren. So, is there anything that you
Okay.
want to leave our viewers with?
Thanks to everybody for the support. Could use would love to get this funded. Could use your help in doing that. Even if it's the book's not for you, if you can let your friends know, would appreciate it. And we're still going to be here, even if we don't quite make this goal. We'll come back. We're really a father and son project here, so I didn't have the backing of a large organization to try to launch this. So we're just trying to get Jack's ideas out to the world. So really appreciate your help on that.
Yeah, no, of course, and I'm absolutely delighted to have you here today. I think we've had some really good conversations, and a comment from chat agrees, really cool conversations. And so, look forward to continue to working with you on this and seeing how
Absolutely.
the Kickstarter goes because I'm
Yeah.
just I'm excited about it personally.
Well, and I thank you for your support on that, because we wouldn't be here without everybody helping us. So thank you.
So, my next guest on this is actually not going to be until the 18th. So, 2 weeks from today, we'll be back with next episode of The Designer's Den with Paige Lightman and Ben Heisler. Um, Fantastic authors, convention organizers. They do everything. They run. Paige is my co-host on the Roundtable. They run their own actual play podcast, Feats and Fables, and so looking very much forward to speaking with them in 2 weeks. And yeah, they're absolutely huge behind the scene creatives. So make sure that you tune in for that, and we'll have some more giveaways then. So until next time.